Now, moving on to the keynote speaker. I'm going to give a little bit of his bio that we actually posted on the site, and then just some other words. Srini Koushik is the Chief Technology Officer for Magellan Health. In this role, he works with and leads a team of talented professionals delivering innovative technology and data-enhanced products and services that will improve patient outcomes and care for people who need it the most. Most of you will know prior to his role, a few of the roles, Srini was the president and CEO of NTT Innovation Institute, a Silicon Valley-based startup focused on building multi-sided platforms for today's digital businesses. He has 28 years of experience as a programmer, Chief Technology Officer, Chief Digital Officer, Chief Information Officer, and P&L owner for Fortune 100 companies including IBM, HP, and Nationwide. Certainly has a track record of implementing innovative solutions, unpacking complex problems, and hacking the technology and culture of global enterprises to deliver extraordinary results. Outside of that, Srini says that I could announce him just as a schlep that likes to come back to Columbus, even though he lives in the coolest place back in the valley. But as a personal friend of mine, I'm very, very pleased to have Srini here. I think he is one of the national thought leaders we have in this space. So please welcome Srini Koushik.
Okay, part of, does this work? Good morning. Part of what Bart didn't mention is I travel so much that I thought this was November, so the mustache. So if people have seen me before, this is, I think it's Movember and I'm here. So anyway, I want to make sure that we get some time. Let me bring it up. Okay, so what I wanted to cover here, first of all, Bart, thank you for having me back. I was here at the first event, and as you mentioned, been associated with Agile since, 2006, 2007, and have tried to stay close to it, and have been lucky enough to work with a lot of thought leaders, Bart being one of them, but John Stahl, Michael Ma, Dustin Potts, Tim Heller, pretty much the Agile community here worked together in one team at one point in time, right? And that's like, when you talk about the dream team of Agile, we all had them there at the Nationwide Application Development Center back in 2008, right? And it was actually a fascinating journey to go build that. I'm just so pleased to see you come back 6 years later. And what was it? The first time we did it was about 200 people or 200. Yeah, around 200 people were in here, and then you come back year after year and you see this thing growing, and it's just fantastic to see that. And the part that he mentioned about, I live in the Bay Area in California now, and but I love to come back to Columbus because of the talent that's here and a lot of the innovation that's coming out here. Ben Blancara, who's sitting back there, is just, he keeps me up to date. He's one of the other guys who keeps dragging me back to Columbus, and I enjoy it every single time I come back. So the current iteration of the role that I'm playing is, I've been lucky enough that I get to come back and be a CIO a second time, right? The first time around, it was in a technology landscape that was kind of very different than where we are today. So the first stint that I had was from 2002 to about 2010. And then I went and did startups and a variety of other things, and now I'm back in the same role but in a different industry for healthcare in 2016. Right? And as I came into this role, when you look around, the world has actually changed completely. And if you don't realize it, let me walk you through why I believe it's changed. And a lot of the concepts that I talk about here started off with a book by a gentleman named Salim Ismail. How many of you are familiar with the Singularity University? A handful. Right? The Singularity University is a think tank that's been set up in the Valley, made up of some of the best and the well-known futurists in the world, like Ray Kurzweil and others. And they've been looking at where technology is headed and what does that mean to human society. So the types of things that we're seeing today, they're coming true at an alarming pace. I still remember in 2007, I sat in a conference where Ray Kurzweil got up and said, "Mark my words, by 2014, the PC is dead," right? And think about 2007 and where we were and others, and when you fast forward to now, don't go literally by the fact that the PC is dead. At that point in time, the only way you accessed information was through the PC. Today, that's probably one of the last places. The only place you probably use a PC ends up being within the corporate enterprise. But in other places, you're using your mobile device, you're using tablets, you're using voice-activated devices, all of those things. And technology is just, grown exponentially. So this book basically talks about the fact that you've heard of the term unicorns. You've heard of how companies, get billion-dollar valuations very quickly. How do they do that? And what makes that component? And let me walk you through that. Here's what's changed, or here's what's going on from a technology standpoint. Never before in the history of the world have we seen a convergence of trends like what we see today, right? Everything from computing, and even though there's debates about Moore's law, ending, where Moore's law ends, quantum computing is going to pick up. IBM just put their first test quantum computer on the web where you can actually go write code on it, right? So the power of computing continues to grow, and at the same time, it's shrinking into smaller and smaller footprints. And what that really means is, and when you combine that with the connectivity and how connectivity is growing, so in terms of local area networks and wide area networks, you see that everything that is in the world can be connected to the web and can be connected to the network very easily. Some of the things coming down the pike there in about 12 to 18 months, is 5G. So when the carriers roll out 5G, it just changes things completely, because 5G gives you 50 megabits plus download-upload speeds on your mobile phone. So now, the telco guys are kind of struggling to go back in and figure out what that means for data plans and things like that. But what that means is what you can do with mobile technology that is compressed into a format that, you have everything from your refrigerator to washing machine to my car that's connected at all points in time. And where that's leading to is the digitization of the world, right? I call this everything that used to be analog has now become digital. And things like Uber are possible because, 10 years ago, if you needed to hail a cab, you either had to pick up the phone and call someone, or you had to wait and watch out for a cab, like you don't know where they are and other types of things. But the fact that I can basically take a digital version of that, have it on a map so that I know where that is, right, and connect people together is basically the digitization of the analog world. So the technology that happens, the solutions that come out are pretty innovative. So this is no longer using technology to automate things, but this is fundamentally changing how we do business. For my friends in the banking business, if you're not, I'm sure you're aware of everything, but most kids that are coming up today, cash means nothing to them. If you've got kids, most of the times and like they go out and they want to buy groceries or something, and you need to give them $15 or something like that, you Venmo it to them. You don't actually give them money. Venmo just got bought by PayPal a couple of months ago, and the valuations were just skyrocketing because the implications are money transferring from me to Bart, for example. It's electronic. I'm Venmoing the money to him. Today, the model is they're connected into Chase or Wells Fargo or something like that. But once I've disintermediated that, I don't need those guys because capital is available freely. I don't really need you to do that. It becomes electronic money that I'm Venmoing between one place and others. And again, they're first in the marketplace, but there's about 100 different solutions that do the same thing, right? So it's the digitization of the analog world. Now then take that and combine it with the economic and the demographic changes that we're actually seeing. The economic changes around what's going on in the Asian economies. In fact, most of the innovations are coming out of Asia and Africa in the mobile space because the U.S. has got legacy, as an example, which is we went through the first 2-3 revolutions of technology, so there's legacy. They don't have it. They're going straight into the digital component of it. And the demographic change is pretty important as well because there is a trend towards when you look at the next generation. I'm not going to go into these buzzwords around millennials and others, but the current generation of workforce doesn't want to work like our people, old guys like me did, right? In the sense that you pretty much gave up your life, you had no work-life balance and all of those other things. People, no matter if they're doctors or lawyers or any of those things, are actually thinking about, wait a second, I don't want to come out of school and work 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. The sharing economy and digitization actually gives really good opportunity. In fact, we're looking at something within Magellan where we are focused on mental health as an example, right? And if you think about somebody who's on suicide watch or something and they need to talk to a psychiatrist, the stigma associated with that prevents a lot of people from going into a doctor's office. And even when you need to talk to a doctor, now I got to figure out if I can get an appointment, get to their office and go talk to them. We're exploring a solution that we're going to pilot that basically says, okay, so you need help. On the other side of the country, I've got doctors who are basically saying, you know what, I'm tired of this stuff. I just want to work 3 days a week from 12 to 4 p.m. or from 9 to this. We can connect A to B using technology, right, today, video and things like that. And with the way technology is going with Google Home, Amazon, Alexa, and what I'm 100% confident Apple's announcing a home device, at their September conference. When they do that stuff, now I can basically sit in front of my TV. I may be watching a TV show. Time for my appointment flips. You're talking to a doctor from across the country, right? To be able to do that. So those types of solutions are possible today. The way it changes our insurance business from a medical standpoint is, the complexities of billing and the coding and the cost of that piece actually changes for that particular type of care. So it's a pretty significant shift for us as we work through it. And what's going on is this speed is increasing. So the exponential organization concept comes from the fact that if 10 years ago, technology changes took a 3-year cycle, now it's getting into a 3-month and a 3-week cycle of how quickly technology changes. And what's on the left-hand side, your left-hand side of the graph, basically shows it shows how quickly things get disrupted, right? So you take something like Tower Records, which have been in business for 40, 45 years, and then come into 2002, Jobs gets up and announces iTunes, and like the record industry and the music industry has changed completely from that point onwards. Like basically people stop buying records in albums, they're buying 99 cents songs. And you think that's fantastic, that's a major disruption. 10 years later, iTunes has been disrupted a couple of times. Right? Nobody uses iTunes anymore. You're essentially going in and either streaming it from other places. So the rate at which technology is changing, that streaming technology wasn't available a couple of years ago. Now it's available, it's been taken, and the models that are kind of very quickly the things. On the right-hand side, that's a Ray Kurzweil chart that says if we go at this rate, about the 2020, 2025 time frame, computers should be able to operate like a human brain. 2025 to 2030, right? That exponential curve is what he's talking about. So when you talk about that, what it means to companies is this is a statistic that just opened my eyes the first time I saw it. If you go back to 1955, 60 years ago, and look at the Fortune 500, today there's only 55 of those companies that still stay there. The average lifespan of a company in the Fortune 500 is 15 years. Average lifespan is 15 years. Think about it, right? We've got some really strong Fortune 500 companies here, and they've been there for a few years. But as you start looking at this, the turn rate, like the half-life of a Fortune 500 company, is reducing significantly, right? And that's because, again, the speed at which you're able to adapt to these changes. So what Salim Ismail and others come back in and talk about is these new generation of companies are called exponential organizations. Exponential organizations are companies that deliver 10x or better returns than their competitors using far fewer resources. But what they're actually doing is they're delivering it through pretty cool organizational techniques and using some of the latest technologies very effectively. Some of the examples they talk about, and there's a few that I've added on, when it's because it's a mix of, because most people when I say this, they say, well, that's startup, they don't have legacy, okay? I put Apple up there, I put GE up there, and Microsoft up there because Apple's a 40-year-old company now, so they are legacy. Microsoft is a company that most people had written off until 2 years ago because of, they didn't have anything innovative. They're just probably one of the most innovative companies today in the marketplace with where they're going and what they're coming into. So what makes them exponential is the question, right? Here's some of the common threads that these guys observe. First one is these companies actually have a massive transformative purpose. And I want to talk about this primarily because I'll get to the technology part and what can we do about it. But these companies are actually going after something that is bigger than what they can achieve, right? And so the first thing is, if you look at Apple, their thing is think different. Well, think different about what? About anything. Anything that you talk about, I'm going to actually think different. It gives them, this is not a vision statement, it's not a mission statement, this is a higher purpose that they're going after. Google's massive transformative purpose is we organize the world's information. Can they ever do that? Probably not, but it just gives them ways to grow and look at additional areas, like these are guys who are looking into analytics for healthcare right now. I got up in front of my town hall at work and said, yeah, don't look at United Healthcare and Anthem as our competition, look at Google and Apple, right? Because that's the folks that we're going after. And then we in Magellan started the journey, and we basically said, why do we exist? And I'm really proud of our leadership team that came back in and said, our massive transformative purpose, this took us about a day and a half, but is we want to lead humanity to healthy, vibrant lives. Why? Because I think we can leverage technology to be able to improve patient outcomes. Because unlike the property casualty insurance side of the house, on the healthcare side, people actually use the insurance. That's why you have it. So if you use the insurance, even if you take a very parochial, making money viewpoint of it, if people use the insurance, if people are healthier, then it's actually better for the bottom line, right? You don't do it for the bottom line, but you do it for outcomes, and that actually does help us. And that's where we started from. Here's some of the key things. I talked about ExOs, and I talked about what organizational techniques. These guys talk about two things. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it's not about ExOs, it's about what we do from an IT standpoint. Some of the organizational techniques they talk about is, today these guys, like whether you take Uber or Netflix or Tesla or any of these guys, the way they go out and operate is actually very different than traditional organizations, right? They've split it into two things. The left-hand side, which is the blue side of it, is all focusing inwards, right? Because you actually build these systems and you build these companies using techniques where you kind of extend it by connecting into other companies, building an ecosystem around it. If you do that, then the ability to interface with other companies is critical. The ability to have dashboards that tell you how well is that interface working is important. The ability to experiment, right? So if I have to try something, if it's going to take, more than 2 weeks and 3 weeks to try it, that's just too late. Can we actually do the experiments very quickly? And how do you allow employees to actually go be autonomous and don't have centralized control over it? So it's fundamentally a set of techniques that these guys use to do this. Let me show you by using an example. Netflix, okay? Netflix is one that actually fits this model. Netflix, as an example, fundamentally uses staff on demand. Like, when you start thinking about staff on demand, one of the questions I always get is, oh, that's outsourcing. That's me just going out and getting contractors. Actually, no. This is actually more specialized. So if you buy the premise that technology changes very quickly, our ability to stay on top of it, if you're in the data space as an example, if you tell me today that you know what's going on in Hadoop and that piece, then I don't believe you because there's just something new coming out every single day in that data space. So it is very difficult for anyone to be knowledgeable about everything that's coming out. But the way these companies go about it is, they buy the fact that the technology changes every 2 to 3 months. So they say, okay, I'm going to go get that expert just for that particular thing, and then I move on, right? And I don't have to bring them on board. I partner with them to go deliver it. Netflix builds content that way. A lot of the content that's generated, they have their own studio, but a lot of the content that's generated comes from that component. Community and the crowd, right? One of the most famous things that Netflix is famous for is the algorithm for recommendations. They were one of the first to use the crowdsourcing, right? If you guys are familiar with Kaggle, Kaggle is a marketplace where if I have a data science challenge, I can go put it out there, and some of the world's best data scientists actually compete to solve those problems. So I can actually put my data out there and put a reward on it saying, whoever solves it the best solution, I'm going to pay $10,000 bounty. And within about 2 to 3 weeks, I get about 5, 6, 10 different solutions from all over the globe, right? Think about this. If I had to go to company ABC, they're going to get me a resume. I've got to sit through and do an interview. And then when the guy shows up, he doesn't have the skills that he's supposed to have. He doesn't know the current version, right? Really don't care. I wanted to solve this problem. I'm going to go put it out there. Somewhere in the world, in this connected world, there are people who can solve that problem. Let's go put it out there. By the way, you know what's going on in that space? When I go to Kaggle, and if you look at the data science teams that come together to solve that type of a problem, it tends to be people that probably work for one of your companies, right? Because they're on their Saturday, Sunday time frame, it's like, oh yeah, I can do this in 3 weeks and earn 10 grand. I'm going to go do that, right? And so crowdsourcing, and Netflix and Apple uses it in certain areas. Tesla uses it extensively, right? Algorithms, right? The other thing. If you're going to participate in this, what makes Uber special is a couple of things. Uber is special because they focus on specific experiences that used to be problematic for you, and they've just made it easier. And the algorithms that they work on. It's just amazing. Like, because of the amount of travel I do, I'm in an Uber almost every day. And I get a chance, I talk to the drivers every single time I go in. Basically, the way the surge pricing works is just phenomenal, right? And where I live, if it's 6 a.m. in the morning, there's not that many guys coming in. And so it's always surge pricing for me, 2x pricing. And I start talking to the guys and say, what's going on? And he said, well, we're all in the Sunnyvale area. This is about 10 miles away because that's a guaranteed pick. And then what happens is, like, when Uber announces on there, it shows up on his thing saying, Los Gatos has got 2x pricing, right? All of these guys start migrating over here to a point where, like, supply catches up with demand. And after that, my search pricing kind of drops to be able to do it. The algorithm is just like, when you start thinking about what's gone into building that, that's just amazing. That's kind of what's difficult to replicate with people. Leveraged assets. So when you look at it one at a time, the key is, in order to become an exponential organization, you don't really have to be good at all of these, but most companies try to get to be good at 6 or 7 of them so that they're able to grow very rapidly. And grow in a way that they're leveraging the cloud and crowd, right? So what it comes down to is this. At the bottom line, to me, the whole concept of ExO comes down to this. First of all, that's the first thing term is mine. I don't want to blame Salim for that piece. Our customers today are Appleized, and what I mean by that is, one of the things that's not talked about as much is the behavioral change that the iPhone and apps and things have caused, which is fundamentally, today we expect certain things without even knowing it. When you go into a store today and buy a new gadget and come back home and open it up and press the on button, it turns on and it works. That means the battery is fully charged. If you just think back to about 8 years and 9 years ago, that never used to happen, So Apple's point, and Steve Jobs, there's a video about it where he talks about it. Apple's point is, here I am at Christmas, I'm excited about getting a gift, and I just come down and it says, okay, plug it in for the next 4 hours before you can use it. But I can actually take my supply chain and say, just before I ship it out, that last burn testing that I do, I can charge the battery and put it in there. These are lithium-ion batteries. They'll retain the charge for a while, and so they ship it out. And today, anything that you open up, it's there. It's charged and comes out. Apple has created an expectation for an improved experience, right? Most ExOs deliver that. Uber's experience that they count on is the fact that, finding a cab, knowing when it's going to arrive is simple. When I get off, I don't have to worry about if he's going to overcharge me or any of that stuff. I know what the price is. I know what comes out, and I have a chance of paying it without taking out my credit card or cash, and I just walk out. Lyft does the same thing and others, but Uber's the one that's used the most today. So Apple is most companies, as you think about it, think about the experience that your products and solutions are delivering. The second piece is you always have an engaged ecosystem. We talk about Uber, you talk about Apple, you talk about Tesla, because how many people do you see talk about General Motors and how proud they are of the car they've got? But if you go talk to a Tesla user, they will not stop raving. So they've built an engaged ecosystem of customers where they've just gone out to go please them. So you don't see anyone else. So after Apple, Tesla was the first time you saw anyone stand in line for a car that's not even going to be available in 2019. And people putting down $1,000 just to wait for a car that's coming out. That takes effort. It takes a specific way to go build it. Most of these companies do that. And then the one component of it that's important is the cloud. The cloud and the cloud. Exponential Organizations is not possible without cloud computing. The fact that I can experiment very quickly, I can stand up things, I can go experiment very quickly. If the idea works, I can scale it. And if it doesn't work, I can shut it down, is a pretty big component of what enables these organizations. So as I pointed out, you've got Apple, you've got others that are more traditional organizations. As I was coming back into the role, I said, okay, there's a certain way we ran IT. How does that fit into an Excel? So here's the traditional model for IT, right? Again, wherever you work, there's some version of this sitting in your organization, which just comes down to, look, it's all about, we got to manage our business partner relationship. This is a value stream map that in the green shows our core activities, right? Wherever you start, we got to manage our business partner relationships. You've got to figure out how to gather specifications or requirements. And then there's some sort of solutions development, whether it's build or enhancements. And then I have to deliver service support, right? After it's delivered to the customer, I've got to make sure that it's maintained and kept up to date and others. Those are the core activities. And what you see in the blue and the purple up in the bottom are the support activities that are there. So you've heard John Stahl and others talk about lean. When you talk about lean, they talk about the fact that you have core activities. There's necessary waste, there's unnecessary waste, and all of those things. When you take a lean approach to IT, you will actually see that IT portfolio management, enterprise architecture, security and risk management are related to delivering value to the client, but they're not directly in that delivery path. And so this is a fundamental model that's not changed for about 20 years. Like whether you have this picture or not, any organization, I can go find some version of this sitting out there. As CIOs, what we used to do in this model was basically come back and say, how do we manage an environment like this? Well, first of all, I got to standardize the heck out of everything. Right? You got one way of doing things. I have to have a common methodology. Oh, you want a machine? It's got to be this or that, right? And so standardization was important because, at a certain point in time when resources are expensive, when you standardize it, I can kind of make it into something that is, consumable. I can deliver it at a cost. So most companies would go through standardization. Most companies went through centralization of IT. Okay, again, IT. If I get all the project managers together, by the way, like when I'm saying this, I'm not pointing it out as a negative. I did this. This is fundamentally what we did nationwide as well when in the early 2000s and others. Centralized control. You need actually get everyone together, because when I put people together, I can grow skills faster, I can do those things. It was all about specialized skills. Oh, I need a tester, I need a requirements analyst, I need this, so let's go build those skills. Agile methods, right? Companies have started adopting agile methods in terms of how you find waterfall didn't work, how do I actually drive it faster? And the focus was always on things like automation, efficiency. So it was about how do I get to fewer bugs, how do I get to better quality in code and others. And then when you didn't have the skills and specialized skills, in order for us to be able to go get extra skills, you outsourced it, right? My contention when I came back in, and this is as part of my interview process with Magellan, I actually walked the board through it and said, you know what, that model was actually very effective. It was built for turn-of-the-century problems, because what was happening at that point in time was resources were scarce. If I had to buy a laptop from IBM, it was $3,000. If I had to go work with SAP to deliver an SAP implementation, it would take 3 years and millions of dollars. Things were costly and things were scarce. When you do that, this model is a very good way for you to be able to deliver it very efficiently, and that's why you go out and do that. It's the equivalent of a factory model. The model the world we live in today is actually quite different, right? Here are some of the shifts that have happened because of the ExOs. Like, if you're trying to enable an ExO, here's some of the shifts that have to happen. We have to go from this whole product mindset. I know a lot of people talk about product management and others. You have to go from a product mindset to a platform mindset. There's several readings I can send to this group if you're interested, but platform thinking is actually quite different. You're not just thinking about the product in general, you're thinking about the ecosystem you build with it. You're trying to figure out how to actually bring in different components to be able to do it. You have to understand how to partner with people to drive it. Most companies actually are starting to go in and start thinking about platforms. It's about getting usage on the platform. And by the way, even your traditional legacy system can be considered as platform. But, if I'm back in my old job and I'm managing our claims application, well, if I'm treating the claims application as a platform, I'm starting to think of where that ecosystem ends and extends into. I'm starting to think of, the Blue Ribbon body shops for Nationwide who are actually providing that piece. I'm thinking about the customers that are connecting in. How do I actually engage them? And so what you build with a platform tends to be things that are valuable to the consumer, and they actually get them there. The second part of that comes down is we stop thinking about our users as consumers, and you start thinking about them as co-creators. One of the reasons why Apple and Tesla and others get talked about that much is because they give you the ability to customize things, right? So customize things being, even with a Tesla from a car standpoint, I can decide if I'm going to ride 6 inches higher or 6 inches lower, depending on if I want to be on sport mode. Like the transmission actually rises and falls. I can decide how I actually drive it, and I become a part of that product creation experience. The consumer becomes a part of that. So people start thinking about consumers as co-creators, not users of the system. Big change. Third, right? This is something that a lot of companies don't understand is, yeah, we have an ecosystem. We have our partners and others. Most ExOs have open ecosystems. So if I have a product that I'm going to go participate in a particular ecosystem, making it open is important because as a consumer, if I'm going to come in to use that, I need choice in there. So if I can only go to a place, so these exchanges that have been created for healthcare as an example, when you go in there, if it just had the same 2 choices across the board, it's not going to be that useful. The more people who participate in the exchanges, the more valuable that platform becomes. So the closed ecosystem. So we go from standardization to mass customization, right? Again, I'm going at this at that higher level because start thinking about what it means to your application. Standardization to mass customization comes down to the shift that you make there is, let me use the Apple Watch as an example. The Apple Watch is probably one of the most standardized environment you could think about because you can't tell Apple like what things are going to look like. But what they will tell you is I can have There's only 3 different cases of the watch that you can buy. But they've given you the ability to customize everything from watch faces to bands and all of that other stuff. So every person owning one of these watches looks like he's walking around with something different. He or she's walking around with something different. So they made the customer a co-creator because they're fitting it to what they want to be able to do, and then giving the ability to mass customize it to their needs. Like, you have one band when I'm going running, and I have a different band when I'm going to work. So the 5th one is probably one of my biggest things, and this will probably cause some questions. So for the last 25 years, the way people have thought about applications within an IT organization is they're applications, and the applications own the data. For about 3 years, I've been saying, like, it's actually a reverse of that stuff. Because when you have applications that own data, the mindset and how you actually build changes. If you kind of think about it as it's data, and a job of an application is to manipulate the data, modify, change, use, or any of that stuff, then you actually get to the point where most companies like this operate today, because they don't deal with that, data silos and others. And today, the good news is the technology allows us to do a lot of those things. Specialized skills to full stack skills, and outsourcing is pretty much like, I say it, and I said it in one of the conferences, and one of my friends from one of the Indian outsourcing companies came back and said, no, we're still doing well this year. I said, look at your last 3 years' numbers. It's changing, because if it is true, and I absolutely believe it's true, that the technology is changing very quickly, and I have a tough time getting my employees to pick up the next skill and the next skill and others, you have about 10 times the problem when you've got like 150,000 people working at a Wipro or Infosys like that have to make that switch. Right? And the other reason why I think outsourcing is, and that is going on its way out, is when I had large multi-year projects, like, I have an SAP implementation that takes 3 years, you have time to make a factory model work. You can outsource the thing. For the first 6 months, it's going to suck, but then they're going to figure it out, and then the next 2.5 years, they'll make that. In fact, I've worked for HP and IBM, and that's our model for how you end up making money. Well, if I'm going to have to deliver solutions in 3 months and in 2 months and that type of a cycle, that model does not work, and they have to evolve as well. And they will come up with a solution, but the traditional model that they have doesn't work. So it's a departure from today's IT. So here's kind of where we are going with this. This is the way our structure is set up from Magellan, right? Our model comes back to how do I take ideas and either create or modify new platforms, and as they're doing that platform, as you're building the platform, what data am I picking up to be able to go in? So the way we think about the cycle is actually very different. And ideas could be, as I said, something that just enhances something a solution that I've got out there, or it could be something completely new that we want to go try out. And the way we're starting the organization of the team, so we've been there about 5 months, we've started that with one team, we're actually starting to roll it out broader, is the team structures, right? The autonomy, the way we've set up the team structures is we've got these, what 2P stands for 2 pizza teams, right? And so you actually know what a 2 pizza team is. It's the Amazon Jeff Bezos thing that says, if I have a team that takes more than 2 large pizzas to feed, then it's too big, right? So most of our teams, that you're setting up are 2 pizza teams, right? Like, that are that size. Second is they're horizontally integrated teams. So if I have an application developer that needs to be working with a cloud infrastructure person that's doing that, those guys are sitting together. So it's not applications, let me flip it over and go get a DevOps person or something. So it's a horizontal integrated team, right? And the type of people we actually go internally hire and put into that is also different, and I'll share a little bit of that. Portfolio of experiences is the second thing, right? What we choose to work on and how our portfolio management works, we have our portfolio of work, but the experience we deliver actually impacts how we drive that. Now, so let me jump into a couple of different things. From a smart creative standpoint, we're fundamentally going after a different set of talent. The aptitude, attitude, and being adaptive is the big component that we're looking for our talent. Our leaders, we're hiring people who actually can learn and actually go from there. If I have a leader that comes in and says, I'm an expert in this space, I don't really need them. Because nobody is an expert in this space. We need constant learners that are coming in. The team sizes I've talked about. I'm going to rush through a few things. The experience design I want to spend a few minutes on because this drives what is there. This is the process that we use. On the left-hand side, what you have is it's a 3x3 grid, right? What we did was, like, one of my people went out and said, as an example, what are the experiences that IT delivers to you as an internal customer? This is one of the grids that we've got on our wall there. And top right, when you go to the right-hand side, it's the importance. How important is that experience? And then top to bottom, it's how often do you do it? So something like sign on to the system. It's a pretty important thing because if I can't sign on, I can't do my job. And it's very frequent. It's way up there on the top right-hand corner. Ordering a PC, right? So whatever experience you deliver as IT, we've got it we mapped about 45 different experiences, and it's all over the place to look at it. And then each of those things had a color coding that said if it's green, then it means it's an experience that people like, and if it's red, it's one that we're really not good at. And so we've started targeting, we've knocking off things like, so we got 14 systems that people sign on to. We rolled out an Okta-based solution to fix that. So we pick the experience we need to go work on. Once we pick the experience, the second thing we do is actually go into user-centered design, right? For people who don't understand, who haven't learned about user-centered design, those three circles that you have, the Venn diagram that you see, most companies have to deal with that, but 95% of the companies start with the technology. I have the technology, I have the skills, let me go build it, right? Some companies say, well, I need an ROI, let me start at, can I make money with it, which is the business viability piece, and then let me pick that project to go work on. What we're shifting to is desirability, which is, let's go run a design thinking session to find out what consumers actually want, right? And fundamentally say, we start there. If we're getting to what experience do people want, then we go to, can we actually build it? And then if we build it, is this something that's viable from a money-making standpoint? Let's go do that. So it's a second step of our portfolio management. And then the last one is, once you pick the experience, you go into, so we're trying to get away from requirements management. Because requirements, fundamentally, think about it, in most companies, requirements is what? You're talking to a business person or someone who's your partner on the other side, and most of the times, they're not domain experts. What they are is they're telling you how the thing worked in the previous system, and they're telling you how to translate it into the new system that you're building, right? And that's really not where you are. And again, if the rules of business are changing on the outside, I talked about the Venmo example, it's changing on the outside, you really want to be able to go understand where the puck's moving so that you can go build it. So the design thinking exercise is a big component of how we go about it. The second big thing that we do in that space is how we're thinking about our data flow, right? I don't want to give you too many details and bore you with it, but at the top is most companies, this is the way they handle data. Operational data stores produce the data. You do some ETL type of an extraction where you go from a relational database into a star schema into a data warehouse, then you extract it into data marts, and then people start using the data. That takes forever. It takes forever in today's world because you don't have the skills. The requests for data are much higher. That supply chain of data is completely broke, right? Vijay, who's my chief architect, and others are driving to our bottom path, which is we're basically saying wherever the data is produced, we should be able to get it into a data lake on our cloud stuff, and then actually put a metadata layer on it. So the latency between the time data is created and the time it's consumed is down to hopefully a few hours, right? And you like for it to be like, the title that I've used is I'm heading towards zero latency data, but that's a goal, right? But if we can get it to even a handful of hours, the insights that you can gain from it are pretty significant. That's a transformation. And if you think about your data colleagues in your company, they spent the last 20 years learning data warehousing and others, and this is completely new in terms of where you're headed into. So this is what we're working on. And then the last component, before I'll open it up for questions, I've got a couple more slides, but the other part that's changing today is no matter what you're looking for, there's probably 2 versions of it already out there today. Microservices is a big deal. Like if you're not looking at microservices, if you're not looking at what's available out there from an API standpoint and how easy it is to integrate with it, you're kind of missing the boat on that front. And again, I think a lot of IT organizations with their security policies and review policies and others kind of block this. And that's a huge opportunity missed, because the ExOs who actually are bringing speed to market do it more by assembling applications, assembling and integrating applications, and not sitting there and writing code for it. Because when you assemble applications, your test cycle changes. How you test applications changes, because these are black box components I'm picking up. I don't have to test that. I have to test the integration of the components. It's actually a very different cycle where the cycle times for generating software becomes a lot shorter than where it is. Just to give you an idea, like the path that we've established, secure web computing in this, let me just come back. I'll leave you with, here's our cycle of how we're working. When ideas come in, we have a social platform, thanks to Bart and others. We're on Facebook at Work, right? So we have Facebook at Work deployed to our folks. Ideas are actually coming in on a daily basis in terms of what you can build and others from business, from our IT teams and others. We're able to come in and cull those ideas down into certain things that says, okay, what's my first step in that process? The first step in the process we've implemented is we are going to build a minimum awesome prototype, right? And so that's our first deliverable. An MAP is basically something that is full working software, not smoke and mirrors, right? But something that can be put in the hands of 10 to 15 people so that they can experience it right away. Time frame for that, 4 to 6 weeks. The amount of money we'll spend, no more than $15K, right? To go build it. So we've taken, I think we're 8 ideas have gone through that cycle already, right? So when they reach the minimum awesome prototype and we put it in the hands of about 8 to 10 users, then the next thing we do is we have to sit there and go, is it a go or no go? Was it what we expected, or is it something that we didn't expect? If it's a go, then the next step for us is to go to an MVP, right? An MVP, again, it's a lean startup model, which is the build, measure, learn. We roll that out to about 200 users. We make some enhancements, a couple of more iterations, roll it out to about 200 users, and then we test again for another 4 to 6 weeks. You're actually testing to see how people are adopting. What we're looking for are things like, wait a second, why'd you do that versus this? And they basically say, yeah, because this is the way my workflow works. So before we go to a larger audience, we work out the kinks, and then everything else after that point in time, from I'm 200 users to 9,000 users is how much I've got, happens in a couple of months, right? To go in. So the cycle times that we're shooting for is 6 months for rolling out a lot of these, with parallel teams running in this space. So it's essentially the way a startup would work to be able to pull that. And what we're trying to do with the model to support an ExO is to actually get IT into a completely different way of thinking in terms of how we drive that. We've probably done this for about 5% of my team so far, right? But we've only been 5 months at it. So my objective is by the April of next year, we're fully switched over to this model in the organization. We're taking our application teams saying, how do I actually implement the same thing? Go from zero to that, in zero to a deployed thing in a very, very short period of time, not spending that much money. The underlying infrastructure for that is you're actually plugging into a web scale infrastructure. We're trying to set up our Amazon complex so that we're actually running pretty much 100% into it. It's enabled by, well, it will be enabled. We just finished our first 2 steps in it, but it'll be enabled by a data lake, which is set up the same way, that's leveraged to use the cloud and cloud-based data solutions a certain way. So I think part of what I wanted to cover here was that, first of all, because of technology, I think how business operates has changed completely. I can spend time on any industry you talk about. It's no longer incremental improvements. These are exponential changes that are happening to organizations. The companies that are surviving it, and people can look at me and say, like, okay, Srini, it's not going to happen. I didn't use the word disrupt. I don't believe it's going to be like a hard disruption, but it's going to be one where as more and more people switch to that model, existing organizations are going to be able to are going to struggle to be able to meet that that demand. And so I believe IT. I had the title saying IT is not important today. What happens is when I talk to people, they say, "Look, Srini, you just said all the technology is changing, so IT should become more important in organizations today." I actually come at it from the other way. Today, my business partner, who's who's the head of our healthcare business, we just spent 2 days with him. He knows the healthcare business, but more importantly, he knows how technology can enable the healthcare business. So these executives that are coming up, like on the claims side, and the next generation of executives are already tech savvy because they've been able to use this. So then the IT teams have to ask themselves, what's our role then? Right? In the past, it was kind of, IT was this mysterious thing, and I can actually go try to drive this. But when you combine things like cloud and software as a service and microservices and others, people with, not having computer engineering degrees can still put together very viable solutions in that space. And that's how does IT respond? And that's kind of what I was walking you through. So Bart's got my card there. I think it was on time. Good. We've got a few minutes for questions, and so I'll wait there and see if you've got any questions. Yep.
Companies that you're working with will take that long to decide whether they want to have a meeting with you. So how do you balance that?
So taking 6 months to have a meeting with you, how do you balance that, right? I'll give you a candid answer. There are companies that don't want 6 months. They're actually ready to move at the same pace, and that's what you go with, right? We've actually in the telemedicine space and others, that's happened to us a couple of different times. We've basically said, okay. It's not about the technology A versus B. You may have a few additional features in that other piece, but the fact that these guys are willing to move quick, we're ready to go there. So it's, I jokingly, this is at our senior executive meeting when we were there in Florida, like I ended the meeting with, we need to be moving quickly because if you're not first, you're last. And I said, who knows where that came from? And half the audience didn't know it, but I'm sure you guys know it. Where did that come from? Ricky Bobby, Talladega, nice. Sorry, Michael.
Thanks, Srini. Whoa. Now it works. I just tweeted that Apple replaced 60,000 workers in China at Foxconn with robots. Uh-huh. So the idea that robotics or a computer can behave or think like a human may be happening faster than 8 years out.
Yep.
My question is, in 8 more years, we're going to probably go from 7.4 billion humans on the planet to about 8 billion and rising. Where do you see exponential organizations dealing with the exponential issues of population growth on that curve and automation increasingly displacing workers on the divergent curve?
It's actually a fantastic question, and So I'm part of a couple of different think tanks in the Valley. Like one of them is the Accenture. The Accenture produces their Vision 2020, like the next year's vision and things like that. If you look at this year's thing, we spent a fair amount of time on just exactly that question. In 2015, we spent time on, okay, this is going to happen, and as it happens, what happens to people who are displaced by this, and what are the economic and social implications of that? There's two diverging views of it. One that's a little bit more optimistic view that says, look, in the past, when all we had were abacuses and numbers, we had to do the calculations and we had to do all of the manual calculations ourselves. Today, that now I've got very powerful calculators and others in my pocket, I'm actually able to do higher level functions. And the evolution is going to head to the point where you actually can do more of those higher level functions. There's another part of it that just says there's going to be social and turmoil as you go through it. The latest conference in Davos, if you guys are interested to answer that thing, they put out a report called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Right? They talk about this fact, and they said I think the turmoil will actually be felt a lot more in first generation in like leading world countries like the U.S. and U.K. and others. Because as it comes in here, what happened to the manufacturing industry 20 years ago is going to start happening to the information industry as you walk in, like the service economy and others. And the question is, I think it's real. People are recognizing it, but it is something that I tend to have a more optimistic view that says, I think humankind will actually start working on more important things, which are take us to a better outcome for humanity as opposed to a lesser one. So it's whenever there's that industrial revolution that's happened, there's been a fear of what comes next, and it's natural to see that piece. I think we will evolve. We will get there. I know it's not a concrete answer, but it's a real debate that's going on with some of the top guys. Like you if you're following that debate, Elon Musk has come out and he said artificial intelligence is going to be evil. Right? And then you've got the Google guys coming up and saying, yep, no, we don't think so. It'll still be controlled by this, and that's a real-time debate that's going on as AI is taking over more and more of the functions that we're working on. We're clearly I tell you, impact for us. One of the first things that you do from a screening standpoint when somebody calls in to Magellan or any of these healthcare companies is to kind of go evaluate what kind of care they need and send them to that first thing. It's completely rules-driven. It's driven by this piece. AI can take that over tomorrow and probably do a much better job than what's going on there, with where technology is today. So now we've got to find out if that's going to happen, then what's that step? Those folks who are answering that call at that point in time, what do they end up doing? Maybe they are seeing a recommendation from AI and providing more of a human touch to it, right? And then so our cost of delivering that, so again, we're starting to think about it. I don't believe we've got concrete answers for it though. Question? Yeah. That's back here.
Hi, just looking at all the challenges, you mentioned early in the presentation how the United States, we have a lot more legacy. And I work in an industry that has heavy legacy, and yet you're competing in a world that, some of them can go straight to digital. So as we look at this model and as the trends, what would be your advice, like the top 2 or 3 things that an organization with a lot of legacy should focus on first to start moving to be able to compete, let's say, world 5 years from now?
Again, fantastic question. This is, Srini, it's not a consensus opinion. What I believe we want to do and what we are going to focus on is most people try to go solve the entire problem, right? So I'll just take a very specific example. I have a legacy application, right? And that legacy application is running on, an AS400 or iSeries or whatever IBM's calling it these days, right? It's running on one of those machines. It's a legacy thing. In order for us to compete in this marketplace, I got to kind of renovate it completely. Most IT shops that I go talk to, that's the approach that they take. What we did was we went and put that experience thing up there saying, okay, what are the most important experiences that people care about, right? You know, how you know, eligibility checking or you know, how care is delivered. Like there's only 3 or 4 experiences that you as a customer care about when you work with us. So we're saying we'll figure out a way to modernize that component of it and put the rest of it in containment, you know, as we work through it. So that's a way by which I can still match whoever it is on the outside with a much better experience, because you know, when you're still dealing with a startup, they're still learning. And for everything that I say positive about Uber, they've got enough negative things as well in terms of how they handle, you know, the drivers. Half the drivers are not happy with the way like they're compensated, things like that. So they're still working through kinks. But I think as a legacy organization, as you're coming in, I think the opportunity exists to actually take some of those key experiences and deliver that very differently. And from IT, what that means is we got to stop thinking about these legacy transformation programs. And this is not a new thing for me. You know, this for people who knew me from Nationwide in 2007 and 2008, I fought every legacy transformation program that was there. I said, like, you know, no, that thing has lasted for this much. It's fine. Like, we need to go figure out how to deliver a better experience. And for me, I think that's the way we go and compete. Because otherwise, if you're going to try to fix what you've got and compete today, you don't have the capital to be able to go do that. You don't have the resources to do it, and you don't have time to be able to do it. So I do believe that you can actually level the playing field by delivering a very, very similar experience, right, in that space. One more is what Bart tells me. Cool, back there.
So Srini, one of the things you mentioned is that looking at moving away from business requirements, and you said it's because the business area tells you how things are working now. So what's the workaround? How do you go about gathering requirements for the new system?
Right. So we are, I think, again, take everything that I say from, it's always going to be applied within a context, right? You know, you're always going to have the traditional requirements as long as I have legacy systems and I have to make enhancements, that's there. What I'm talking about to the previous question, you know, if you're going to deliver differentiated experiences, the way we go about gathering those requirements is by using design thinking. So design thinking, if you're actually familiar with it, what we end up doing is we actually go put real software in the hands of people. We put software prototypes in the hands of people, right? And if you really are if you really are using design thinking, what happens is, you know, let's say you gave a software piece on a mobile device to someone, and they're spending time looking around or trying to figure out what to do next. You're actually not supposed to help, right? You know, you're just supposed to watch. And then after they've gone through it, you actually do an empathy-based interview that says, what were you trying to do? You actually go through that process. Again, you can have your business partner with you, but what you're doing is you're exploring that in the context in which it's used. And more often than not, what you'll find out is what you were building for is probably not even the real problem you're trying to solve. Because that's the way people perceive the problem, so you're actually coming up with a different set of requirements. So this, by no means am I suggesting business partners are not valuable anymore or any of that stuff. It's like, you know, if I have somebody who is used to doing, if I pick on banking for a second, if I have someone who is really used to doing transfers, right? I need to transfer money to Bart. How do I do it? I go in and set up a transfer on my web account to be able to do this. And you go ask a business partner who's done that how to do this again. They'll show you and they'll tell you how you should set it up on a mobile device. But that's not the problem today. Today, as I said, like, you know, if I pull out, I was showing a couple of people yesterday, my last 50 transactions that were done were all done on Venmo, right? You know, so like my daughter would ping me and say, Dad, I just went to the nail salon. I paid $30. Can you transfer it to me? So it's like, go in and say, you know, Shreya, Venmo $30, done, right? And I never went to Chase, which is my bank. Right? And never went to to Wells Fargo, which is her bank, right? And did that transfer. All that got taken care of, right? can Chase start thinking about that? Meeting for dinner with a couple of people, we started talking about stored value cards and how does that impact banking, right? And so those types of things are more visible when you actually go in and have that conversation in terms of how technology, how these solutions are getting used today. And we took our core team through one design thinking session, so they went out right away. They built they built an app that will help people who have sleeping problems sleeping at night. So we said, oh, this is pretty cool, let's go show it. I said, well, there's our lunchroom. Go sit down and run a design thinking session with these guys, right? They come back, our business partner in that case saying like, I didn't realize this is all the feedback that we're getting. We were getting a completely different set of requirements coming out of what people actually wanted out of an app like that. So I think, there are alternative ways to be able to collect that. It's never going to be a rip and replace. It's always going to be targeted on the areas that matter the most and actually go deliver that component. Well, thank you for having me here, and I'm going to be here for the rest of the day. So if you have any questions, please stop by and we can have a conversation. And Bart, always appreciate being called back into this. Thank you.